In 1987, 6 people checked into the Glennwood Boarding House in rural Yorkshire, England. None of them ever checked out. The police found their belongings, their food still warm on the table, their cars still parked outside, but no bodies, no blood, no forced entry. The only thing investigators couldn't explain was a name, written in pencil on the inside of every wardrobe door in every single room. The same name in the same handwriting. And the handwriting matched the man who had died in that house 11 years earlier. The Glennwood Boarding House was the kind of place that looked perfectly ordinary from the outside. A large Victorian building at the edge of Thornwick Village. Red brick, ivy-covered walls, a hand-painted sign that read, "Rooms available, reasonable rates." The owner, a widow named Margaret Oates, had been running it since 1974. Locals described her as quiet, polite, slightly reclusive. She never caused trouble, never had complaints, but she had one peculiar rule, a rule she never explained to guests, no matter how many times they asked. Room 11 was always locked, and it was never, under any circumstances, to be opened. In October of 1987, 6 guests arrived at Glennwood over the course of one weekend. A young married couple from Leeds, David and Susan Hartley, a lorry driver named Pete Roscoe, who was stuck due to a broken-down vehicle, a retired school teacher, Eleanor Marsh, and 2 university students, James Colby and his friend, Anya Petroff, hiking across the Dales. By Sunday morning, Margaret Oates called the police herself. She told the dispatcher, and this is her exact quote from the official record, "They've all gone. He took them. I think he finally came back." She refused to say anything more. And within 48 hours of making that call, Margaret Oates was also gone. The police found 6 beds, neatly made, 6 breakfasts untouched, and one door, room 11, standing wide open for the first time in 13 years. Detective Inspector Colin Mathers was the lead investigator. He later gave an interview to a Yorkshire newspaper in 1994, one of the few times law enforcement spoke publicly about the case. He said, and I quote, "In 30 years on the force, I've never felt actual fear at a crime scene. That house was the exception." Here's what the forensics team found, or rather, what they didn't find. No fingerprints belonging to any of the 6 guests anywhere beyond the ground floor. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no evidence of any vehicle approaching or leaving the property during the night, despite the muddy lane that would have captured tire tracks perfectly. But inside each wardrobe in each guest room, scratched lightly in pencil in identical handwriting, were 2 words, "Arthur serves." Arthur? Who was Arthur? The house records revealed that in 1976, 11 years before the disappearances, a man named Arthur Glennwood had died in that house. He was the original owner, Margaret's father-in-law. He had lived in the boarding house his entire adult life, serving guests, maintaining the rooms, cooking meals. Locals said he was devoted to the house almost obsessively. He died of a heart attack alone in his room, room 11. The handwriting in the wardrobes was confirmed by a document examiner to be a near-perfect match to Arthur Glennwood's known handwriting samples from old guest ledgers. A man who had been dead for 11 years. When investigators finally entered room 11, the room that had been locked since Arthur's death, they found something no one expected. The room was immaculate. Fresh flowers in a vase, a fire laid in the grate but unlit, the bed turned down, 6 extra pillows arranged carefully on the floor, as if prepared for guests who would be sleeping there. And on the bedside table, a single note written in that same handwriting. "They are resting now. Do not disturb. A." Now,
Here's where it gets complicated, and where the case splits into two very different theories. The official police conclusion, quietly filed away and never formally announced, was that Margaret Oates had orchestrated the disappearances herself, that she had suffered a psychological break, possibly connected to grief over Arthur, who some local sources suggest was the only real family she had. The theory was that she had somehow moved the guests, possibly drugged through their evening meal, and transported them somewhere. She herself then fled. Sounds plausible, except for one problem. Margaret Oates was 71 years old. She weighed 7.5 stone. She had severe arthritis in both hands and walked with a cane. Moving 6 adults, including Pete Roscoe, a 16-stone lorry driver, without a trace in one night, alone? Investigators who went on record privately said they never believed it. The second theory comes from a researcher named Dr. Patricia Howe, who spent 3 years investigating the case and self-published a book in 1998 called The Servant's House. Her conclusion was more disturbing. She found evidence through interviews with elderly locals who had stayed at Glennwood in the 1960s and 70s that guests had occasionally reported similar experiences. Waking to find their wardrobe door open, hearing footsteps in the corridor at night when the house should have been empty. One woman described waking to find a man standing silently at the foot of her bed in old-fashioned clothing before he simply was not there anymore. Dr. Howe's theory was that whatever Arthur Glennwood had become after his death, whether you believe in such things or not, he had never stopped serving the house. And in 1987, something changed. The guests didn't disappear against their will. According to her theory, they were invited somewhere else entirely, and they accepted. No one has ever been found. The Glennwood Boarding House was demolished in 1993 after falling into disrepair. But locals say that before the bulldozers came in, workers refused to enter the building after the first day. One of them told a reporter he had found something scratched freshly into the brick above where room 11's door had been. 2 words, in pencil, still clean, still sharp, as if written that morning. Arthur serves.
6 people, 1 locked room, and a dead man's handwriting on the wall. The Glennwood disappearances remain officially unsolved to this day. No bodies were ever recovered, no arrests were ever made, and Margaret Oates was never seen again. But here's what I want to know, and I want you to tell me in the comments. Do you think Arthur took them, or do you think they went willingly? Because one theory is terrifying, but the other one is worse. If you want the full documented case file breakdown, subscribe and hit the bell. Next week, we go deeper.
Subscribe if you want to hear more true horror stories hidden across the world, because the next story is even darker.